Hello, so yesterday there was the Aircraft and Avionics update for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I thought it might be worth having a look at the CJ4, which was one of the aircraft that has been most affected by the update. So we're going to go and jump inside it, but before we do so, let's just have a look at the CJ4 if you've never seen it before. It's a really nice aircraft in Flight Simulator, and it's modelled really nicely. And you can see, obviously up here in the flight deck, it's quite Spartan, but even though you never really see the back of the aircraft, they've bothered to model it, so it's it's really lovely. Anyway, let's go and jump inside the cockpit in our normal place we might sit and see how this works. So I'm not sure if any of the major assets like the yokes or anything have changed. It looks fairly familiar than the way it used to, and it's not quite study level, but I think most of the work has been done by working title into making the various screens portray the world as more accurately to the way they do in the real aircraft. So anyway, let's go and get this started up. So the first thing we do is go to the battery switch over here and turn it on, and you'll see straight away it's going through a boot up sequence, and it's showing the status of various systems like the hydraulics and the battery. So, and then once we have turned the battery on, we can go and turn on the, you can notice here that there's a flashing message, emergency lights not armed. So emergency light arm switch is over here, so we turn that on, the warning light goes away and the message goes away. So now it's complaining about the pitot static is cold, so we can turn those on if we want to, which will make that message go away. So that's the heating of the pitot tubes outside. And then we can go and turn on the standby attitude indicator over here, which has got the well, I think he calls it flight display because it's got the attitude indicator and vertical speed on it. Okay, and then we can turn on the master avionics switch, which boots up a whole pile of stuff, and you can see it has an initialization sequence where it is aligning itself, or sorry, I should say calibrating itself, because most aircraft have, as well as GPS, which won't give you accurate up to the second information. They've usually got inertial guidance as well. Your mobile phone has inertial guidance. You may not know it, but it's actually using the accelerometers inside the phone to figure out where it has travelled since the last time it had a reading, and that's how it manages to make your position move so smoothly on a map. So you can see that's finished calibrating now, and it's put us on the ground, and it knows which way up we are, and it knows which direction we're pointing, which is all good. Okay, so where do we go next? We're going to go and start the engines up so we don't deplete the battery while we're playing with the flight planning computer. So first thing we're going to do then is go and turn on the beacon light for outside. If we go and look outside, you can see that light will have come on. Whoops, the sim's being a bit stuttery. So it's actually quite difficult to see from here. There it is. It is flashing, honest. You might also put the nav lights on if you really wanted to let everybody know that you're in the aircraft, so the wing end lights have come on, for example. Okay. You might also put the logo light on. So to start the engines, it's remarkably straightforward in this aircraft. You lift these two flaps, put both engines to run on the central console, and then you hit the start levers for the engines. And that's all there really is to it. You can see overhead, or sorry, on the top of the right hand screen in front of the pilot, you see the ignition happening. You see the engines coming up to speed, so they are turbofans, so you've got the gas turbine speed and the turbofan speed. Obviously you've got fuel here. This is going to look vastly different than it did in the past, so don't be scared that this looks so different. It's like it boots up by default in this kind of hybrid view, showing the map and your route once you've programmed it, and traffic and weather and terrain. But you can change the mode of the way it is all rendered. We'll have a little look at that along the way. So just out of interest to show you that, if I go and click terrain up here, yeah, so I'm showing terrain mode and the weather mode. Okay, And you can flick it again and it will show you the sort of a simplified terrain view, which won't make much sense until we zoom out far enough. There's a knob on the far right for this screen where if we roll that knob we can get as far as seeing the coast, and then suddenly you can see that it's like this simplified view of the world. Obviously if you go and press that terrain button again, you start to see the elevation changes. Unfortunately the southeast of the UK is quite flat, so it's not really showing us much of interest. So let's go and zoom that back in so it's not rendering quite so much at once. Okay, so engines are up and running, and you can see on the flight management computer it's now asking us to initialize position. So we go to POS init at the bottom right, and all we have to do is select the location coordinate that we want. So we'll select that one and it fills it in for us directly below. You can't, I mentioned earlier, this isn't completely study level. A lot of these fields don't work in the FMC, the flight management computer, but some of them do. So we can see we can go to a next page. This is page 1 of 2. So again, doesn't do anything, look. So it's a bit odd in places. We can get rid of this meshes though, saying clear. Oh no, it won't. So no flight plan. This differs a little bit from the Boeing in that you've got the scratch pad and a message line, so they're not sharing the same screen real estate. So no flight plan. How do we go and fix that? Well, you'll notice at the bottom right it says flight plan. That's the same as pressing the FPLN button here, but it's just a bit of a shortcut. So when you're starting the aircraft up and configuring the FMC, you can do that. So if we click on it, it wants to know, remember square boxes are mandatory fields. It wants to know where we're going from and to. We are going today go from EGSS, which is Stansted Airfield, and we're going to come back to Stansted, EGSS. So we're just going to have a bit of a play doing a circular route, and obviously it can't work out a distance because it's from and to the same place, which is fine. All of the fields with hyphens are optional, so we can execute that change, and that's done the basic route. We can do performance initialization now. So if we come in here, all we really need to do in the CJ4 is fill in a cruise altitude. We are only actually going to climb to 5,000 feet for our purposes today, and execute that, and it's worked out some other numbers around the place for us. So we can go to the takeoff configuration, we can put in the outside air temperature. So if we have a look over here, it's about 8 degrees outside. So we put in 8 into the outside air temperature, and we can go next page on this, and it gives us some V speeds. I don't think it will calculate this for us. We are going to use 15-degree flap for takeoff, so that's something worth looking at. So when we move the flap lever, we can go to 15 degrees. Yeah. If we go and look at our departure and arrival, so this is, at the moment, if we look in legs, all we can see is it's EGSS. It doesn't show you the destination as an entry on here. So if we go to departure arrival, we're going to set up our departure from Stansted. So just for our little example flight, we are going to use a standard instrument departure, just to, to give us something to program in. So we are going to use runway 22, and then we are going to use, let me pull up the information in little nav map, the procedures and restrictions, the BKY5R standard instrument departure out of Stansted. So we're going to use runway 22 then, and the BKY5R standard instrument departure. So if we execute that and then go and look in the legs page again, you can see all of those waypoints for that standard instrument departure as far as D358C are now in here. So we can use the next and previous page to see them. So you can see the flight plan now runs out at D358C. So we can go back to the departure arrival button, go back to the index for it, and then go into arrivals for EGSS. We're going to come back in on runway runway 22. We're not going to use a star, and we're going to execute that. Okay, so then if we look in legs now and we go next page, we can see in between the end of the standard instrument departure and the beginning of the ILS route into the runway is starting at CF22. Let's just have a look on the map, see where that is. CF22 is here. So it's put in that much of the route, but it's got nothing in between the end of the standard instrument departure and the beginning of the approach into the ILS. So we need to put in these couple of extra waypoints. So we want to put in, let me just stop this moving. We'll put in Oxduff and Totvo. Yeah, so we'll put them in the middle here. So Oxduff, Ox-D-U-F, and then we select where the discontinuity is, and it will insert it. Notice it doesn't work a bit quite like the Boeing. It didn't push the discontinuity down. Yeah, it actually took its place. And then we want to go to Totvo. But this will work like a Boeing, where if we put this on top of an existing waypoint, it will push that waypoint down. So if we put it on top of CF22, yeah, Totvo has appeared and CF22 has been moved downwards. Okay, so execute that. We could... So our flight only gets as far as 4,000 feet on the restrictions based on the, the standard instrument departure. So we'll just climb slowly out to 5,000. We're not going to pay too much attention to the detail of the flight plan. We're just showing you how this works really. If you wanted to take a waypoint out, you can press the delete button and then the soft key next to it and it would remove it. Okay, so we've programmed the route. You can tell when you've programmed a route because you see the solid line obviously appearing on here. So if we were to zoom out, we would see more of that route appear. So let's go. So you can see the whole route now has appeared on the map that we're going to be flying. Okay, so the other thing we will do before we get going is go and change the heading on the autopilot to the runway direction. So we want it to be 222 degrees. We're also going to set the course just as a bit of a backup to... Now, notice actually, yeah, this is a good point. You can't really use the course unless the entire navigation system is in radio mode. So you press the nav button and it switches it so it goes green, and that means it's in radio mode. And at that point you can set the course of the horizontal situation indicator. So we could set that to 222 as well, which will come in handy during approach. So let's press nav again over here, and this flicks this back to GPS or FMS mode as it calls it. So basically it's means the flight plan is going to follow the GPS coordinates, nothing to do with radio beacons. Okay, should we go and have a fly? So let's see if we can pre-select any of the modes on the master control panel for the autopilot. So we are going to want to climb out to 5,000 feet eventually. So we can roll this. You can see the target altitude changing here as I roll the altitude knob. So there's 5,000 feet. Can we pre-select, for example, which we try? Let's try vertical speed mode. Yes, it will let us pre-select it. I imagine though, if this behaves anything like other aircraft, this is me finding out at the same time as showing you, it may well take on the vertical speed at the point we engage it. But we'll find that out. So if we went for 2,500 feet a minute, we'll soon find out what it's going to do. We could immediately go for... Now this will be interesting. Can we go for nav mode before we've even taken off? Yeah, so it's kind of reserving it. So we'll probably find we can go for heading and lateral navigation. Yeah, so what it will do is use heading until it picks it up, and then we'll go for it. Okay, so flaps are in position. Let's just have a look outside. You can see the flaps have extended there. Press enter. Oh, sorry, press end on the keyboard. Okay, so in order to taxi out, we need to take care of a couple more things. So we're going to put the taxi light on. We'll put the strobe on when we get to the runway. We're pretty much good to go. It's a very, very straightforward aircraft to operate. It's just nice to see some of these new functions. Actually, before we go anywhere, it might be worth having a quick look. You can press the PFD menu button and it pulls this option up here. So the outer ring of the middle knob will move the section of the PFD selector. There's lots and lots of submenus you can go into in here. So you can say, I want to go into config, for example, and then it says push select on the knob, so push it and you go into config. If you want to go back out, there's an escape key which will come back. Okay, so there's lots and lots of things you can configure in here about the display of this. When you're actually in flight, the only buttons you typically need, I can press PFD menu to make it go away again. The only ones you typically need are format, which will change the primary format that it's being rendered in. So you've got like the HSI, or you've got a slightly different version of that, or you've got the map mode. Obviously you saw earlier we can turn on and off the terrain, the traffic appearing on here, or we can switch on and off the weather, things like that. Some of it isn't actually very functional. Like you can see there's no radar menu. There is a refs menu, so you can go and set your V-speeds if you know them. Yeah, so remember it calculated them in the flight computer, so you could go and program this by hand if you wanted with specific V-speeds. Notice if we don't interact with the menu, it disappears after a few seconds. You've got barometric pressure here as well, so we can manipulate the barometric pressure by rolling it, obviously, or pushing it to flick to standard. Yeah. Obviously if we press B on the keyboard, it will adjust itself to the correct barometric pressure for where we are. Just trying to think what else we can show you really. That's about it of the basic things. The flight level change mode is interesting in the CJ4. It's the safest way to move between altitudes. We'll have a look at it in flight. Also, it's worth pointing out this has an electronic throttle system. So as we move the throttle through its travel on its, on the levers, it goes between different modes. There's cruise mode, climb mode, and takeoff or toga. So we'll see that happen. Okay, so I'm going to release the parking brake. You can see we haven't started rolling immediately, which is nice. But if I do ease the throttles forwards, then we are rolling. So I'm going to immediately turn hard right. I'm going to keep the yoke out of the way during the flight, by the way, just so you get to see the instrumentation. Okay, let's start rolling then. So I'm just going to go out towards runway 22 at Stansted. It's being a bit stuttery, isn't it? There's obviously some aircraft assets loading in nearby. There's quite a few aeroplanes around. As soon as we get in the air, it will smooth out. Yeah, there's somebody flying around doing some sort of crazy air show. Okay, so if you remember, we are going to climb out to 5,000 feet. We've pre-selected 2,500 feet a minute. It'll be good to see if that gets rewritten during the takeoff roll, or sorry, during the climb when we engage the autopilot. But the aircraft should pretty much take over without too much fanfare. Okay, so we begin accelerating. So if you notice over here, this is going to go to takeoff, so that it's coming up to the selected, or a target throttle setting it would like. And I'm having to hold a bucket load of left stick. Look at it accelerate as well. It will accelerate like crazy, this aircraft. So gear up, flaps up. We're already going through 190 knots, so I'm going to come back on the throttle. So you can see I've pulled it back into cruise because we're going far too quickly. So I'm going to engage the autopilot at this point and see what happens. So autopilot on. So AP has appeared. Yes, it is selected. It's gone for 2,500 feet a minute, so it didn't override it with what we were actually achieving, and it's now steering to get us back exactly onto the GPS route. So we're climbing at 2,500 feet a minute towards 5,000. We could lessen that down. So if we go and roll this knob forwards a little bit, we can take it down to 2,000 feet a minute now. You can see the needle here for the climb rate has dropped to 2,000. We didn't put the landing lights on, did we? Once you're in the air below 10,000 feet, and the strobes as well, you're supposed to have landing lights on. This is the whole problem of multitasking, with talking about something and explaining it while you're flying along. So you can see we're following the track. So this has all been rewritten completely in this latest update to the simulator. This is all brand new, the indication of this. And also, look, you get the predicted distance and time for the upcoming waypoints. So we should be holding at 4,000 feet really, but we're not going to pay too much attention to that because we're just looking at functional stuff today. So if you remember, although we're on autopilot, I've just pulled the throttle back to cruise. If I ease the throttle forwards, watch what happens to the symbology here. So climb mode, but look at the percentages. So if I leave it at the top of cruise, it's at 92%. If I then ease it forwards into climb, it goes a few more percent. We're going to go over speed. I'm going to pull the throttle back to idle. I don't want to overspeed. Because below 10,000 feet you can't exceed 250 knots, so we're just pulling it back. The thing I really wanted to show you, and I can demonstrate this by leaving it in cruise mode to do it, we are going to change our target altitude to, say, 8,000 feet. Yeah, so I've set 8,000. To get there we need, so the aircraft isn't climbing or diving, it's just, you know, it's gone for its target and stayed at 5,000 that we were at previously. So we need to tell the aircraft how to get to 8,000 feet. So a good way of doing that is FLC, or flight level change. When we select it, notice a marker has appeared on the indicated airspeed ribbon. And that's its target airspeed it will keep to during the flight level change. If I increase the throttle now, it will turn the extra thrust into climb rate. So I've just opened the throttles up, and you can see it is now climbing, holding the same speed, or attempting to hold the same speed, but it's turning where it would have accelerated if it was level. It's turning that into climb rate. So obviously the more you open the engines, the steeper your climb rate becomes. So if I go full throttle, you can see the climb rate is going up at 5,000 feet a minute, 6,000 feet a minute, and now it's leveling out. So I need to be careful. As soon as it started leveling out, we obviously started accelerating because we were still at full throttle. So I've pulled the throttles back and we're now going back to cruise. But again, you need to watch the rate of change on the airspeed, so to make sure you don't overspeed. So you may play with the throttle for a few seconds to equalise the aeroplane out and then get on with your route. It's a cloudy day, isn't it? But it's lovely how it now displays so much information in such a clear manner on the displays. It's worth pointing out some of the buttons down here work as well, so you do get control over the second screen. So if you go lower menu, for example, you can influence what this is showing on its display, so the format and so on. And again, it uses the knob in the same way that this knob affects this screen. Then the buttons down here will affect this one. They don't all work. You can see things like the database button doesn't work, but you can pull up things like even the chart button doesn't yet, look, which is a shame. But it's still, you know, it's better than nothing, let's put it that way. Okay, let's have a look at where we are on the map. So we're off towards Oxduff, and then we're going to turn back in. So there's Oxduff on our route plan. So notice it's throwing away the legs behind us of the route. There's no point for it to keep them, so it's only showing the forward facing parts of the route. So we can change the range up here by rolling the knob. Yeah, so you can get more of a view. If we go for the PFD menu, you can see you can change the format of it. So if you use the outer ring, remember, so we move the focus to this one, and then we can select, and we should be able to, yeah, we can roll the inner knob to select the mode. It's very cool, isn't it? Obviously we will change mode later, but we'll escape for the moment, leave it on this mode. We'll zoom back in a little bit because it's handy to see where we are. So we need to descend back down to 3,000 feet. So if we can set our target altitude then to 3,000. And we do flight level change again because it's an easy way to do it. And you can see it's preset the speed. We can move the speed marker. We could say we can come down at anything up to say 240 knots to give ourselves a little bit of margin. So it's descending already, look, to accelerate on the same level of thrust. It's very clever at doing it. So if we pull the throttles back to idle, watch the descent rate drop off. So we've got far less thrust, look. So 2,500 feet a minute, 3,000 feet a minute, nearly 3,500 feet a minute. So it's coming down. So if you didn't want to come down so sharply, you can just open the throttles. So we're giving it some thrust, which means to maintain to 40 knots, it can't come down as steeply, obviously. Okay, so if we start thinking about ILS, because we're coming down to top VO, we want the radio tune to 110.5 and the course at 222, which we'd already done. So where do we check the radio frequencies? If we look in the FMC, there's a tune button. And you can see it's already tuned. Because we selected the destination airport, it's pre-selected nav1 to become the ILS frequency for us. Yeah, so that's all done. And remember, we already set the course. So when we make that final turn towards the runway, we can switch nav over to use radio rather than GPS. So we're just about to make the turn at top VO. We are above the glide slope at the moment, so what I'm going to do is throw the spoilers out as well as the engines to idle. It's just warning because I put the spoilers to full, it lights up the master caution light when you do that. We are now below the glide slope. We've come down steeply enough that we're below it. Okay? So we're now running in towards the airfield, it's over there. So the aircraft will start rolling out and we can go for approach mode, which is here. So that has automatically switched this over to, it's pressed the nav button for us to using the radio. Yeah? And it's lining up on, there we go, it's about to drop the nose to follow the glide slope, and it's about to turn left probably. It's doing it very gently to keep us on the centre line. So all we have to do now is worry about speed and flaps and gear. So we're already down to 180 knots, so let's go extend the flaps. And you can see, look, the drag from the flaps. Also, extending the flaps at all shows us an angle of attack meter. So we can drop the gear now. Flaps to the next level. So the aircraft's basically flying itself down. It doesn't have auto land, I don't think. So we won't let it slam itself into the runway. We will take over. So if I... Notice we have got quite a wicked crosswind today. But it is indicated on here. Look, we've got 36 knot crosswind, so it's quite fierce. So I'm going to come off the autopilot now, and I'll fly it in under my own control. So flaps to full. It's very, very easy to control. I'm going to make sure I don't get too slow. You can see there's a target airspeed. Notice we're being pushed to the left by that wind. So I'm just going to crab across it. This is going to be quite a landing, isn't it? Although it may not be as stiff wind at the ground. We'll wait and see. So notice you actually get the airfield drawn out, which is quite useful sometimes. So now it's just a case of trimming the aeroplane a little bit, keeping an eye on the glide slope so we're slightly low. So we'll just raise the nose gently, open the throttle a little bit, get us back on the glide slope. There we go. Then we can drop the nose again. That turbulence really is kicking us around, isn't it? The wind speed is dropping though. It's come down to 18 knots. It's obviously gusting in multiple directions because it's kicking us around all over the place. It's swept round to be almost a headwind for a few moments. As we get lower, the wind speed is dropping off, which is good. So we are remaining quite fast related to the target airspeed for the aircraft condition or the configuration. A little bit low. To be honest, once we get to this point it's completely visual anyway, so we're just looking at ourselves in relation to the runway and the touchdown point. Whoa, look at wind has got underneath us there, look. Really lifted us. Yeah, we hit about a 15 knot gust just as we touched down. I love landing in adverse conditions in the simulator. It's great. But there you go, so a little look at the CJ4 in not the most clement conditions. So I put the flaps back up already. We're just rolling off the runway on a high-speed exit, and obviously in the real world you would then roll to a stop, get permission from the ground to get direction to taxi in. Obviously we're not doing that because we don't have ATC, but that's not what today is all about. Today was just to have a look at some of these new screens and how the various things work if you've not used the CJ4 before. So it's very, very straightforward to fly. It's not study level, but it's kind of halfway there, enough to make it interesting and enough to make it actually very easy to go and fly a route and to program a route, because there's not too much you have to deal with within the FMC. It'll be interesting to see if they develop it any further, or if any third-party teams come along and extend the avionics suite out even further than Working Title have done so far. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you found that interesting, and I'll see you again soon.